Kuei wanted to become stronger. Driven by that single desire, he trained day after day without ever taking a break, fighting wild beasts and demons. His days repeated like that over and over. Kuei trained diligently every day with his blade, and in the end he became the strongest swordsman in the world. Kuei's eyes always burned with determination. Carrying a long blade, he stood before a remote forest. Then Kuei suddenly sensed something unusual high above. Without hesitating for even a second, he shot into the sky. The warriors below began wondering aloud. Where did Captain Kuei go? I'm not sure. Maybe he sensed a monster nearby. Captain Kuei's monsters were already waiting on the cliff above. Dan was sitting there with them. She smirked. This village now belongs to the great Dan Sama. She began issuing orders one after another. Conquer, trample, and plunder. It is time to show these humans how terrifying demons truly are. But things did not go as planned, because Kuei was there. His appearance made Dan stammer. Why, you're Kuei? You again? Kuei replied. That is exactly what I should be saying. There is nothing in this village that you demons want. Turn around and leave. I do not want a pointless battle. His arrogant tone infuriated Dan. Huh? What kind of attitude is that? Are you looking down on me? I only wanted to have a little fun with a few humans. Do not tell me you have forgotten that humans are merely toys for us demons. The moment she finished speaking, she lost her temper and ordered, Go. Capture him. With his muscular body, Kuei swung his blade in several elegant arcs. Dan kept smiling, admitting that the lizard men were no match for him. Then how about this? With a frightening look, Dan invoked a summoning spell. A gigantic earth golem appeared directly before him. Kuei calmly observed as Dan ordered, Crush him. Smash everything flat and turn that human into minced meat. Clenching his fists, Kuei analyzed the enemy. It was an earth element monster capable of regenerating endlessly as long as its core remained intact. In that case, I only need to strike that single point. After calculating his target, Kuei drove a powerful punch into the golem. Dan's eyes widened as she screamed. What? He blew away my super cool giant with one punch? This is a game-breaking bug. Overpowered. Cheating. Kuei said softly. Physical enhancement is the simplest form of magic, but also the ultimate one. This is the result of my training. With this strength, I can pierce any monster. The defeat only frustrated her further. Kuei answered honestly. Sorry, but I prefer women who are a little more modest and polite. The serious reply drove Dan mad. From afar, Holam Na slowly approached in clothing that concealed her face. She raised a hand and created a brilliant sphere of light, murmuring, If it is those two. A magic array began appearing beneath the ground. Kuei and Dan panicked. A trap? What is this? I have never seen it before. Kuei frowned, just as confused as Dan. Suddenly, radiant light erupted from beneath them. Holam Na stood frozen in astonishment and watched. That night, the sky was full of stars, and the bright moon shone over the area. Dan's eyes slowly opened in a daze. She lay inside a shelter, curled up beside a warm fire. A young man approached from afar and asked, You're awake? Monsters and Kuei stood there staring at her, leaving Dan bewildered. Her torn clothing made Dan scream in panic. Huh? Kuei calmly sat by the flickering fire and explained, Everything suddenly lit up, and when I woke, we were already here. It seems we were caught in some advanced spatial magic. I removed your clothes to check for injuries. Your pets were worried about you too. The atmosphere became extremely awkward, but Kuei leaned closer and whispered, What is wrong? You're frighteningly quiet. Are you hurt? I should examine you more carefully to make sure you aren't. Before he could finish, Dan shoved him away in embarrassment and screamed, Go die. Saying things like that is insulting. Kuei remained seated and continued calmly. Why are you angry? I have no interest in your body. I was only giving first aid. Dan could only wave her arms and call him an idiot. But he became serious. In any case, we are in serious trouble. Let us call a temporary truce. You should see our current situation yourself. Dan finally calmed down and listened, then walked to the entrance and looked upward. Dan stared blankly at countless buildings stacked before her, too shocked to speak. Ah! Her scream echoed across the open land. What the hell is this? Her pet stood outside and watched. Sitting beside the small fire, Kuei asked, Have you calmed down? Dan buried her face in her knees and answered, A little. Still in that position, she asked, "What are we going to do now?" Kuei was equally lost and could only answer, "I don't know." She unconsciously continued, "Can we return to our world?" Kuei bit his lip and gave the same answer. "I don't know." Each answer made Dan more depressed. "You are the worst. Can't you say something more hopeful?" He replied softly, "If I do not know, I can only say that I do not know. But I have no intention of sitting here and doing nothing. I will find a way home no matter what. I want your help too. Until then, I swear I will protect you." Hearing his sincere words, Dan finally raised her head and looked at him with trembling, glistening eyes. Too embarrassed to meet his gaze, she muttered, "You really are the worst, acting cool at a time like this. It is irritating. Extremely irritating." Her strange reaction only confused Kuei more. "I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I'm sorry." Dan suddenly widened her eyes. A strange light had appeared near the forest. "What is that?" A whirlwind flashed past like lightning. A monster with an enormous mouth was charging toward them. Everyone shouted in alarm. "Fall back. Will Lady Anise protect a monster?" Dan focused and thought, "I still do not have enough mana to summon my strongest trump card. Then I will use the second strongest." She assumed a stance and called out, "Summon. Answer my call, wolf-type beast." But everything remained unchanged. Nothing happened after her incantation. Dan froze with a blank face. "Huh? My magic will not activate." The monster suddenly changed direction and charged at Dan as someone warned, "It is coming. Dodge." But panic left her unable to react. Kuei drew his shining sword from behind and rushed forward to shield her. The savage monster struck with such force that he crashed through a cliff wall. Kuei lay among shattered stones, covered in wounds, while Dan screamed his name. She rushed over anxiously. Kuei forced his eyes open and told her, "I'm fine. My body was trained for this." Dan snapped, "Liar. You're bleeding everywhere." Kuei could no longer use body enhancement magic. "What the hell is happening?" Dan desperately tried again. "Why can't I summon anything? What is going on here?" But when she placed her hand on Kuei's body, a strange magic array appeared. Dan stopped crying, stared closely, and gasped, "Huh?" Suddenly, Kuei's body transformed into a huge, muscular wolf. Dan stared and called his name hesitantly. In his massive wolf form, Kuei howled throughout the forest. He charged directly at the monster without hesitation, his eyes burning with determination to win. Kuei unleashed several kicks too fast for the naked eye to follow. Dan stood stunned, overwhelmed by thoughts. This form, isn't that the wolf-type beast Funer-chan I tried to summon? Why did Kuei fuse with it? After the easy battle, Kuei landed slowly. Standing atop the monster's corpse beneath the bright moon, he let out a triumphant howl. Still in wolf form, Kuei enthusiastically celebrated his victory. Dan clasped her hands behind him and could only call, "Kuei." Hearing her voice, he looked down. His sharp, savage eyes made Dan tremble and shrink back. His wolf form looked far more frightening than his human appearance. Shaking violently, she thought, "What should I do? I need to do something. This happened because of me." Before she could finish thinking, Kuei opened his mouth, bared his sharp teeth, and lunged at her. Dan fell backward in panic and screamed. To save herself, she decisively drove her knee into his vulnerable spot. The kick struck its target perfectly. Kuei's eyes bulged in agony as all the force of the finishing blow hit him. Thanks to that, she brought Kuei down almost instantly. Dan sighed in relief. "I hit him directly in the weak spot." Then she stopped and looked more carefully. Kuei's body had returned to normal before her astonished eyes. He changed back. The peaceful evening arrived along with a strange conversation. "So that is what happened. I never imagined something like that was possible. Dan-sama, are you injured anywhere?" "Me? I'm fine. Probably." Completely exhausted, Kuei groaned. "Sorry, but for some reason my groin hurts like hell." "What exactly happened to me?" Dan frowned openly. "How should I know? I don't understand it either." After calming down, Kuei began reasoning. "I have never heard of anyone fusing with a magical beast. Dan-sama, I did not expect you to master such advanced magic." Dan objected strongly. "I told you, I have no idea how I did it. Honestly, I do not possess that kind of magical talent. You saw it yourself. I cannot even use my summoning magic anymore. My guess is that because we entered another world, the nature of the magic we learned has changed." Remembering his injury, Kuei said, Come to think of it, I could not use body enhancement magic either. If neither of us can use our original magic, this is serious. But this new power may be the key to survival. If your magic can transform me into a beast, I can fight and protect us from dangerous enemies. If we cooperate, we will find a way home. I'm counting on you. Dan immediately became smug. I suppose I have no choice. If a pitiful human wants to depend on the great Dan so badly, I cannot refuse. She laughed delightedly after hearing Kuei ask for her help. Kuei looked toward her beasts. You returned from scouting? They answered in their own language. Kuei was surprised. What? You found water? Excellent. Let's go there immediately. Standing behind him with folded arms, Dan demanded suspiciously. Since when did they become so close to him? The next day brought clear skies and a beautiful blue lake. Dan splashed happily in the water. This is wonderful. The water is so cool. Kuei looked at the clouds and thought, this place is better than expected. We have drinking water and can fish. Still, it is only temporary shelter. We need clues about returning to our world. While he was lost in thought, a scream rang out. Dan stood before a huge monster and shouted that something had suddenly surfaced. Kuei rushed toward her. Dan, are you all right? She begged in panic. Kuei, save me. He studied the monster and thought, we cannot defeat this creature with our current strength. In that case, he decided and shouted, summon it. Beast fusion. Dan became even more worried. Are you sure? What if you lose your mind and go berserk again? Kuei insisted. I will hold on to reason through sheer willpower, so hurry. She reluctantly accepted his decision. Fine. Summon. Appear sea serpent beast. Powerful energy immediately surrounded Kuei, and his hands lengthened into something fierce. His eyes and body changed until he resembled a genuine sea serpent. With savage eyes, he charged the monster, his body now many times stronger. Kuei's growls echoed throughout the forest. Watching his form, Dan hugged herself in fear and whispered, I knew it. He has lost his mind again. Meanwhile, the monster had already moved right beside her. Dan nearly cried in terror. Then what am I supposed to do with this monster, idiot? Suddenly, a powerful blow sent water exploding everywhere. Unarmed, Kuei stood before the monster's jaws. Dan's eyes lit up as she called his name. Kuei shouted back, I already told you. Until we return to our world, I will not lose. With his huge body, he shielded Dan from the monster. Determination filled his eyes. Kuei swung his arm with all his strength and charged straight toward the creature's mouth. Watching from outside, Dan became excited. Go, Kuei. Hit it. Turn your whole body into the swing. Kuei did not hesitate and kicked the monster directly in the face. He followed with a series of vicious attacks that left it unable to resist. Determined to defeat it at any cost, Kuei raised a sharp finger and murmured, This strike will finish you. The instant he finished speaking, his hand pierced the monster's body. Kuei's ferocious power exceeded imagination. His punch smashed into the monster's head, spraying blood as it roared in agony. Dan exclaimed happily, Excellent. Amazing, Kuei, though it looks rather gruesome. After the fierce battle, he finally had a few minutes to breathe. But his body suddenly swelled frighteningly again amid shouts of alarm. Oh no, it still isn't over. Kuei has lost control again and is charging this way. Dan clenched her teeth. Of course it is targeting us. Looks like I have to do this again. Dan gathered all her strength and struck him directly. Please enjoy this brief action sequence. After the struggle, Kuei lay sprawled out and apologized. Sorry, you did not get hurt while I was out of control, did you? Dan replied gently, I'm fine. Do not worry about me. He could not sit up and could only keep talking. Once the effect wore off, the pain would become terrible. Dan explained that it was a side effect. Kuei noticed that she looked different too. She proudly patted her chest. I changed into new clothes. The goblins found them nearby, and there is a set for you as well. Be grateful. With a monster like that wandering nearby, we cannot stay here long. I'll scout the area with the others. You rest. Kuei thanked her with relief. He raised his hand and stared in surprise. It still retained traces of the beast. Is part of the transformation remaining? A moment later, his hand returned to normal. Confused, he could only look at the sky. Suddenly, Dan ran over breathlessly. Wake up, Kuei. We found someone unconscious outside. A blonde-haired woman lay unconscious on the ground, her belongings scattered around her. Dan pointed anxiously. Look, over there. Quay approached the mess and wondered whether it was an accident. He immediately knelt and lifted the woman. She is breathing, and I do not see any serious wounds. Still, we should take her to a doctor as soon as possible. Dan repeated in surprise, a doctor? Quay looked at the broken wagon and had an idea. We will repair that cart and carry her. Leaving her here would be dangerous. Following this road should take us to a town. Dan asked curiously, can you fix it? Quay answered confidently. Equipment repair is a basic soldier's skill. Even a young lady like you should understand that. Watch the patient while I work. Dan obediently sat nearby as he began repairing the cart. She waited endlessly, recalling his promise. Until we return to our world, I will not lose. She cursed inwardly. Does he always say such embarrassing things? It is not like I actually care or anything. Seriously, what is going on in his head? At the same time, Quay thought, this is an excellent opportunity for training. He focused only on the present while sunlight rose through the forest canopy. The wooden cart was finally repaired and rolled smoothly enough. Masa remained unconscious as they transported her. Dan covered her mouth. I feel sick. Quay replied calmly. I expected that. This was only a temporary repair, so the cart shakes badly. She told herself it was still better than walking. Once they reached town, they would no longer have to camp outdoors. Civilization and comfort awaited. Hearing that, Quay lowered his head slightly in disappointment. A town? We have been here so long, and still have no clue about returning home. This world is filled with absurdly strong beasts, and we cannot properly control our weakened state or fusion. First, I must recover enough strength to truly fight them. Suddenly, Masa sat upright in a daze. She said weakly, if you are trying to reach a town, may I guide you? The repaired cart continued down the road. Masa introduced herself. My name is Masa. Thank you very much for saving me. Dan smiled warmly. I'm Dan, and this gorilla is Quay. Nice to meet you. Quay leaned close and whispered cautiously. You should not casually reveal your true name to strangers. This is another world, remember? Dan suddenly realized her mistake. Huh. Flustered, Dan began. My real name is... But Quay interrupted. It is too late now. He asked seriously. You said you can guide us to a town, correct? Masa honestly gave directions. If we follow this road across that mountain, there is a city called Tagona. I was traveling there too, but a fox-like monster attacked me. Quay asked, you mean this thing? Masa blushed and made an excuse. That is inscription magic. While fighting it, I acted on instinct. Please throw it away. The wooden cart continued toward town, but two mysterious men appeared behind the travelers and watched. One said, Captain, look over there. An order rang out immediately. You in the wagon, stop. The cart halted at once. Hey called to them. What was that monster earlier? I need to ask you several questions. Masa answered pitifully. Sir Knight, we are only merchants. A monster attacked us on the road. These people saved our lives. They are not suspicious at all. Hey glanced toward the creature and questioned them. Then what is that? It looks like a monster. Dan stared blankly. Huh? This little one is my spirit beast. Helki became even more confused. A spirit beast? She declared energetically. Yes. I am a beast tamer who can control monsters. Hey frowned slightly. A beast tamer. I understand. Then she announced. Very well. You are under arrest. The news struck Dan like lightning. Huh. Hey explained the shocking decision. Monster attacks have recently occurred throughout this region. If you can control monsters, there is a strong possibility you are behind them. Before she finished, a mounted man raced toward them. Captain, a herd of monsters is approaching. Helki panicked. What? They appeared again. She quickly rode away, not forgetting to warn them. We will talk later. All of you, take shelter somewhere safe immediately. Masa sighed in relief. They left. But Quay made a bold suggestion. Let us help them. Dan turned and asked, Huh? Seriously? Shouldn't we use this chance to escape? Quay explained wisely. Helping them will prove we are not enemies. Besides, there is something I want to test. Dan studied him suspiciously while a herd of monsters charged toward the group like arrows. One knight reported, Captain, there are about 10 ogres in the herd. Hay drew her sword. There are only 5 of us. Prepare to risk your lives. The other knights immediately obeyed. Yes, Captain. Long blades were drawn at the order. Attack! Hei spurred her horse toward the monsters like lightning. Her blade struck an ogre's neck directly. Helki's sword was stained red while her expression remained cold. But the cunning monsters attacked the other knights. Their jaws opened so wide that the young men screamed. Captain Helki realized the enemies were stronger than expected. She no longer had enough strength to protect everyone. A monster's enormous mouth, seemingly wide enough to swallow the universe, closed in on her. Sensing danger behind her, she glanced back. A powerful pair of hands struck the monster's neck and dropped it instantly. Kuei acted decisively before Hei's astonished eyes. Landing beside her, he said, "I came to help." Hei mocked him. "Do not be ridiculous. You do not even have a weapon." Kuei clenched his jaw and replied seriously, "I do have a weapon." Kuei stood before an even larger, fiercer monster, likely the leader of the herd, as Hei tried to stop him. Wait! Kuei could feel it. The beast's blood and flesh were blending into his body. Just as when wielding a sword, he focused every sense. Then he raised his muscular hand. A magic array appeared before him, and brilliant light covered the area. His arms began changing into a different form. Watching from outside, Helki gasped. "What?" Kuei immediately drove a thunderous punch into the enemy. The knights stared open-mouthed. He defeated an ogre with one blow? Who is that man? Kuei boldly taunted the monsters. "Come, let us drive them all back at once." His heavy, powerful fists kept raining down. He attacked the monsters one after another by himself. Hei could only marvel. Incredible. He is facing the entire herd alone. Recognizing the opening, she issued a strategy. "This is our chance. Regroup and reform the formation." The knight beside her answered. "Yes, Captain." Newly motivated, Helki ordered. "Wipe them out in one sweep." All the knights charged forward while Kuei's devastating fists continued without pause. Standing atop the monsters' corpses, Kuei announced, "That was the last one." Hei approached and apologized for dragging him into the fight. "You saved our lives." She then looked at his arm. Hearing the question, Kuei became awkward. Before he could explain, she tactfully said, "It would be rude to pry into the secret of our life-saving benefactor. Come to think of it, I still have not asked your name." Kuei extended his hand with a gentle smile. "You may simply speak naturally and politely." "I am Kuei." Hei answered courteously. "Kuei, next time we meet, allow me to buy you a drink." Although they had only just met, the two already seemed surprisingly familiar. Hei also reminded him carefully. "Could you return your arm to normal first?" Monster corpses covered the ground as voices marveled. All the beasts were wiped out. Dan hid fearfully behind Masa and asked, "Did Kuei do all this?" Masa was equally curious. "I heard an entire knight order was once destroyed by a single monster. What exactly is Kuei's power?" Dan gave a reluctant, vague answer. "Right. It was just some mysterious ability that suddenly awakened. Frightening, isn't it?" She ran toward one corpse in excitement. "This monster is huge. Look, look, we caught an enormous one. Isn't this amazing?" Masa warned softly. "You probably should not poke it." Suddenly, a flash came from the corpse. Dan stared blankly. "Huh." Brilliant light shone down upon the ogre's body. A system window announced that the ogre had been captured as a spirit beast. When the light vanished, a glowing crystal bar dropped before Dan and Masa. Both women opened their mouths and screamed with all their strength. Their voices echoed through the pine forest beneath the white clouds. "What the hell is this?" Sometime later, an ensign appeared before them. A prettily dressed young woman greeted them. "Welcome to the Heoxite Inn." Dan drank deeply and sighed in delight. "I'm alive again. This alcohol is incredible. It is definitely the best drink of my life." Masa laughed. "Our wild vegetables are famous too. Please eat as much as you like." Kuei also enjoyed the specialty food. "Are you truly sure about this? You are paying for all our rooms." Masa gave an awkward smile. "It is the least we can do for those who saved us. The knight captain also spoke on your behalf, so we can cover the expense." Dan's face turned red with embarrassment. "Speaking of money, do you think we could sell this?" The ogre stone from earlier. Masa studied the crystal hesitantly. "It is certainly beautiful, but I do not know what it is, so I cannot promise anyone will buy it. Still, between Kuei's strength and your ability to capture monsters, you two resemble the Demon King's army." Quay stared innocently and repeated, "The Demon King?" Masa explained awkwardly, "Forget what I said. I meant nothing by it." Dan continued enjoying herself. "Innkeeper, another mug of fresh beer over here." Night gradually fell. Dan stretched across the bed. "Eating and drinking until I was full felt wonderful. The bed is incredibly soft too. Returning to civilization is amazing." Masa said gently, "I'm glad you are comfortable, but are you sure this is all right? Sharing a room with me?" Masa asked curiously, "Aren't you and Quay a couple?" Hearing that rumor, Dan panicked. "Huh? What the hell are you saying?" Masa smiled shyly. "Oh, was I mistaken? In a novel I read recently, there was a story exactly like this. A man and a woman fleeing together, alone in the wilderness." Dan blushed and trembled with anger. Did this woman think only about romance? She immediately changed the subject. "Forget that. Let's talk about something else. Something more cheerful." Masa blinked and stammered, "Let me think." "Then how about this?" Their conversation continued beneath the peaceful moon. Masa revealed, "This entire world is actually underground." Quay asked in astonishment, "An underground world?" Dan added, "I do not know the details either, but what exactly does that mean? Do all sorts of things simply fall down here?" Masa explained that this place was the bottom of the world. Sometimes humans fell here as well, and they were called the Fallen. Quay touched his chin. "Then does that mean we are fallen too?" "I understand. Even the laws of this world are entirely different." Dan continued, "Exactly. And this is the important part. Masa has met a fallen before. If we hear that person's story, we may find a clue about returning. What do you think?" Impressed by my information-gathering ability, Quay admitted, "This is genuine progress." Dan's eyes lit up. "Knight? I'm amazing, aren't I?" He smiled. "Yes. This information helps greatly." Taking advantage, Dan demanded, "Then praise me more." Quay was startled. "More?" She giggled. "Yes, much more." Her sparkling eyes waited expectantly, so he reluctantly praised her. "Good girl. Very good." She became annoyed. "You're terrible at praising people." The room slowly became quiet. Dan and Masa fell asleep, and Quay was finally able to rest as well. Suddenly, he heard an abnormal sound and opened his eyes to listen. From the darkness, a frog demon lumbered toward the town. People screamed, "A monster has appeared." Orders rang out. "Take battle positions. Evacuate every guest from the inn immediately." A knight reported, "Captain, all units are in position." Hay commanded coldly, "Do not let it approach the residential district." The strategy began. Archers loose a volley. Countless arrows flew toward the frog demon, but it quickly blocked them with its thick hide. After the barrage, the frog demon remained completely unharmed. Hay began to panic. The arrows did nothing. The frog demon opened its enormous mouth to counterattack. It shot its long tongue forward. The frog demon's strength shattered the ground. It changed direction and lashed its tongue at Hay as someone shouted her name. The captain narrowed her eyes and tried to block. A violent collision created a brilliant flash. Hay suddenly saw something and gasped. Quay rushed from afar like an arrow, putting every ounce of strength into the fight. But even Quay's powerful hands did not damage the frog demon. He stopped and analyzed the situation. Its skin was too thick. Even a direct physical attack had no effect. "We need something with greater destructive power. There must be a way." The inn's fountain. That's it. Water suddenly surged high from the fountain. Quay controlled the stream with his hands and thought about Dan's summoned beast and the sea serpent's ability. "It fused with my body. I can feel its heartbeat. In this state, I should be able to use its power." Quay activated the ability, gathering the water and compressing it. He closed his eyes and concentrated on controlling it. The moment Quay opened his eyes, he saw the perfect opportunity. Fire. A high-pressure stream of water struck the frog demon from above. Hay and the soldiers could only stare open-mouthed in amazement. While Quay focused completely on the battle, someone called out. Dan approached and said, "Sorry. I accidentally overslept." He answered calmly, "It is fine. This opponent was nothing serious anyway." She looked at the frog demon's corpse. "What is this thing?" "A frog." Dan touched it lightly and thought, "That's right. If I touch it, perhaps it will transform like the ogre before." The corpse suddenly began glowing, startling her. "I knew it. It is glowing again." A bright crystal appeared along with the message. You have acquired the frog demon. People around them began whispering. What is that? So that is the girl's ability. Hearing them, Dan quietly moved closer to Quay. He looked at the starry sky and wondered, huh? I feel as though someone is watching us. A small screen displayed Quay and Dan while a mocking voice said, look at them. What adorable little fallen. From high above, Holam Na had observed every action the pair took. She smiled with interest. I wonder whether this group of fallen will entertain me. Far from town, another figure was watching everything. A long-haired woman floated in the air and stared toward the small settlement. She remained motionless with an icy expression. In the silent forest, the wind rustled through the leaves. Quay stood in thought for a long time, closing his eyes to enjoy the atmosphere. Suddenly, his eyes opened in alarm. Strange power appeared within his body, and his arms quickly became more muscular. It seems I can now freely transform individual parts of my body. With continued training, perhaps I can transform more than my arms. But without Dan's power, I still cannot change my entire body. Dan watched him carefully. She wondered, did I truly gain this ability because the rules of this world are different? Quay looked at her. I do not understand the details, but what matters is discovering everything we can do. Dan said seriously, then I want to do something cool too. Quay blinked. Something cool. She pulled out the glowing crystal excitedly. Yes, this crystal. He studied it and said, I have a feeling that throwing it will summon an extremely reliable beast. Dan lifted the stone and replied, I strongly doubt that. She immediately threw the crystal. Go. I choose you. It hit the ground, bounced, and flew forward. Quay and Dan stood still with expectant eyes. The crystal began radiating dazzling light. Its shape suddenly transformed into an ogre. Quay stammered in shock. Impossible. It actually appeared. So we can truly capture enemy beasts and force them to obey us. Dan was speechless, then gradually regained her confidence. That means I really am a genius, right? Quay instantly denied it. No, you are not. Inside a quiet wooden house in town, Masa wore an excited expression as though eager to reveal something. Her mysterious smile made Dan suspicious. What is that smug smile for, Masa? Masa laughed. Nothing. I was only thinking that it must have been difficult. Sneaking away on a morning date. The rumor made Dan recoil in shock. Huh. Masa enthusiastically continued shipping the pair. Meeting in a misty forest at dawn, silently thinking of each other. It is exactly like the book I read recently. I'm so jealous. Dan stared blankly and explained, no, absolutely not. That is not what happened. A voice suddenly came from behind. You two are energetic this early in the morning. Masa looked up and lost her voice in surprise. Knight Captain Helki stood formally beside the table. Come to think of it, I have not introduced myself properly to the ladies. I am Helki, Captain of the Knight Order. It is an honor to meet you. Dan looked up curiously. Do you need something from us? Hay answered honestly. Yes. The priest responsible for this region wishes to thank you personally for destroying the monster. If you do not mind, we would like to invite you to the church. Dan followed behind with growing excitement. I wonder what reward we will receive. A gift card, perhaps? Quay gave more realistic advice. I recommend not expecting much from a reward provided by society. She immediately protested. Even so, my beasts made a major contribution, didn't they? A reward has more meaning when everyone who helped receives a share. Masa agreed. When the goblins attacked, they protected me. I should give them something in return too. Mentioning Dan's beasts made her suddenly realize she had not fed them. Quay turned away and called back. Dan, I will feed them. Everyone else should meet the priest first. She could only respond pitifully. Sorry. Rich and Doc sat deep in the forest with empty stomachs. The sky was unusually quiet, with only a gentle breeze. Suddenly, a ray of light flew at tremendous speed. An arrow pierced straight through Doc's head. Armed strangers approached while speaking crudely. Even a shot through the head did not kill it. A masked leader pointed a sickle forward. If we chop it into pieces, that should work. The other strangers nodded in agreement. They quickly drew their weapons, aiming sharp blades at Doc and Rich. But Quay arrived in time and growled from behind. That is far enough. What do you think you are doing to my companions? He swiftly caught an assassin's arm and used his powerful body to slam the attacker into the ground. In an instant, The other accomplices aimed their blades at Kuei. You bastard. He remained composed. I do not want to injure anyone without reason. Back away immediately. Who are you? A figure in a black cloak stubbornly kept a knife pointed at him. Only a sinister smile showed beneath the covered face. Kuei stood firmly among the assassins. Frowning in anger, he demanded, "What do you think you are doing to my companions?" One assassin said, "Lord Kuei, you consider those filthy animals your companions? Creatures like them exist only to be purged." Kuei's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" The assassin answered, "We have been watching you for some time. We carry out punishment in the name of Goddess Holam Na." Kuei showed almost no reaction. "I truly do not understand what is happening here, but I will never forgive anyone who insults my companions." The assassin's expression turned contemptuous. "It appears further conversation is useless." She gave the order to proceed. Kuei assumed a battle stance and shouted, "They are coming. Prepare to fight." The assassins answered with cries of, "Die." Doc raised his enormous hands and attacked. Rich countered by breathing fire. An assassin's blade flashed toward Kuei, but the strike did not harm him. Her sharp knife drove directly toward Kuei again. He slipped past the attack, but the blade immediately changed direction and pursued him. The assassin struck from above, forcing Kuei to land and analyze her. Her footwork was agile, and every sword line stayed close to a lethal route. She remained steady like a fortress. Kuei thought, "If this continues, we will be at a disadvantage." Kuei raised his arm and decided, "In that case." The assassin pulled back her weapon after sensing something unusual. A monster. She immediately rushed him and shouted, "Receive divine punishment." Kuei refused to yield and drove his fist forward. His thunderous punch shattered the ground and filled the area with light. The skilled assassin dodged in an instant, leaving everything covered in dust. A mysterious leader ordered, "Stop the battle. They are stronger than expected. Retreat for now." Kuei watched calmly and said, "They ran away." Doc staggered over, completely exhausted. Kuei said seriously, "I suspected something from the way you moved." A wounded assassin lay on the ground as he added, "So you truly are a woman." The sky became peaceful again. Dan and the others had already entered the church. The priest spoke gently. "Thank you for protecting us from the beasts." He introduced them. "Father, this is Lady Dan and Lady Masa." They answered politely, "Hello." Dan leaned toward Masa and whispered, "Are you sure this is fine? Should we begin without Kuei?" Masa hesitated. "We cannot keep the priest waiting." The priest smiled. "I heard that you, Lady Dan, possess beast control magic. Is that correct?" Dan laughed proudly at the positive rumor. "That is right. Me and beasts. We are best friends, incredibly close." The priest nodded and murmured, "I understand." Just as her appearance suggests, she is completely impure. Suddenly, the church doors burst open and mysterious figures rushed inside, every blade aimed at Dan. Hay shouted in alarm, "Father, what are you doing?" The priest answered coldly, "That girl is an impure creature. It is the church's duty to punish such filth in the name of Goddess Holamna. I will judge her here and now. Lord Kuei will soon follow her." The insults filled Dan with rage. She threw the crystals onto the floor and shouted, "Come out." The ogre and frog demon immediately appeared behind her. She answered boldly, "Dream on if you think I will sit quietly and die." The priest was stunned. "What?" Dan pointed directly at his face and screamed, "Do not underestimate me, old man. You have angered the great Dan, and I will make you regret it." Dan, Doc, and the others stood courageously against the strangers and priest. The priest frowned. "Filthy beasts have appeared inside this sacred sanctuary?" Hearing the contempt, the ogre and frog demon became furious. Dan pointed decisively and ordered, "Ogre, frog demon, flatten them." They bared their sharp teeth threateningly, but the priest remained calm. "You foolish child." Then he shouted, "Idiots, do not come closer." A protective layer suddenly formed. The ogre and frog demon were blocked by the barrier and could not approach. A huge shield surrounded the priest's entire area. Dan stared in disbelief. "A barrier? What the hell is this? We cannot reach him." He growled, "The goddess protects us. Do not imagine that your filthy sorcery can touch us in the slightest." From outside the protection, Hay shouted, "Father, what does this mean? Why are you turning your sword against them?" The priest asked gently. Sir Knight, you are also a follower of the church, correct? Capture that wicked woman immediately. The goddess will never forgive filth that commands monsters. Those who have been judged must be punished at once. At those words, Hei's expression changed. Dan grabbed her hair in confusion. What do we do now? Masa suggested anxiously. Lady Dan, perhaps we should simply destroy the church. Sometimes escape is the wiser move. Dan frowned with determined eyes. Understood. She raised her hand. All right. Tear everything apart, you two. The ogre and frog demon immediately obeyed and charged wildly. Using brute strength, they smashed through the walls and destroyed everything in the church. Unable to endure it, the priest shouted, Stop! Do you know how ancient and sacred this church is? Dan laughed smugly. That is the price for provoking Lady Dan. Suddenly, a brick fell from the ceiling at tremendous speed. The stone struck Dan's face as if pulled by a magnet, making Masa scream her name. At the same moment, the church collapsed into ruins. Late afternoon light shone across the fallen concrete. Quay watched blankly and asked, So that is what happened at the church? Masa recounted the entire story. Yes, I struggled terribly to pull her from the ruins. Quay looked toward Hei. Good heavens. So that is the glorious wound you received during your duty. Thank you for taking care of her, Lady Helki. Hei blamed herself and could not meet his eyes. I'm sorry. I am not in the right state of mind to talk. Masa suddenly said, We need to leave. Quickly. The Church of Holam Na will certainly send assassins after us soon. Quay looked confused. The Church of Holam Na? Masa explained that every nearby nation worshipped goddess Holam Na. Their doctrine placed humans above all else, while animals and demi-humans were considered enemies of the goddess and had to be purged. The priest even tried to eliminate Quay, the person who saved them. The knight captain must also have been shaken by that betrayal. In any case, they needed to leave immediately. If they slipped away after nightfall, they might lose their pursuers. At that moment, a gloomy voice echoed through the ruined church. This church was destroyed by heretics. What a tragedy! But do not be afraid, my faithful children. The priest stood proudly before a statue of Holam Na. He declared that goddess Holam Na would one day bring a future in which every sin was swept away. He spoke with bitter contempt. Today, this church was destroyed by evil hands. A man capable of transforming his body into a beast and a woman who controls monsters can only be servants of the Demon King. Worse still, our own knight Captain Helki was seduced by those servants and became a heretic. He delivered fanatical propaganda to the crowd. Children of the goddess, the time has come to fight. Until we purge these heretics with our own hands, this land will never know peace. The priest shouted loudly to display his determination to fight until the end. Everyone below raised their hands in support. Quay, Dan, and their companions were already leaving town. Carrying Dan in his arms, Quay asked Masa, If we continue along this road, we will leave the forest, correct? Masa replied, Yes. She suddenly hesitated. But is it truly all right to bring her with us like this? Quay answered kindly, We cannot abandon her. For now, focus on one thing, escaping. Hearing familiar voices, Dan slowly woke. She looked up and saw Quay's alarmed face. Hey, what do you think you're doing? He said gently. Good. You're awake, Dan. She still could not believe her eyes. What do you mean good? You're carrying me like a princess. She continued raging until Quay frowned. Quiet. He heard a strange noise. Hoofbeats. Just as Quay suspected, horses were racing nearby. The group hid inside a nearby bush. The mounted men called out to one another. Dan turned to Hei. They are your subordinates, right? Say something and send them away. But Hei shook her head bitterly. I cannot. I have almost certainly been branded a heretic now. The Church of Holam Na hated heretics more than anything. In this region, Holam Na's doctrine served as both law and morality. Opposing it meant being erased completely. Hei said sadly, As far as society is concerned, I am already dead. Dan stared in shock. So all of this happened because of us. Suddenly, an arrow flew past her face at incredible speed and buried itself in the ground. Hearing a noise, the strangers ordered, I heard something over there. Search the bushes. Terrified, Dan suggested that Quay simply knock them down as usual. Quay refused awkwardly. No, They are ordinary civilians. If we attack them, we truly will become criminals. Dan trembled anxiously. But if we do not, we will never. Then a new idea appeared, and her eyes lit up with a sinister smile. Right? Then we only need to run, don't we? Run with everything we have, faster than all of them. Growing excited, she said, "It has been a while, hasn't it? Let's go, Quay. Summon and fuse with the unicorn." The magic array attached itself to Quay's body. The assassins approached the bushes and ordered, "Come out with both hands raised." But something shot out like a rocket, scattering everything. Quay emerged in the form of a true warhorse. The assassins could only scream, "A monster!" Quay carried all his companions away at maximum speed. Dan shouted excitedly, "Run, Quay! Do not hold back." The strangers stared in awe. What incredible speed! Is that the demonic power hated by the goddess? Quay continued carrying everyone forward at tremendous speed. A long-haired woman standing upon the moon watched every movement Quay and Dan made. She stared after them for a long time. Then a strange light appeared in her eyes as she spoke. An assassin returned exhausted and reported, "Quay and Dan escaped. Forgive me. They were much stronger than expected, so I immediately called reinforcements and expanded the search area." The priest exploded in fury. "Then stop wasting time and go into the field yourself. Post wanted notices in every nearby town. I do not care whether you offer a bounty or use another method. Take every measure necessary." The assassin bowed and obeyed. "Yes, Father." The priest reminded him sternly, "We must capture those heretics quickly." The goddess watched everything through a small floating circle displaying the priest. Holam Na's voice echoed, "Beasts, hideous, disgusting creatures have no place in the world I rule. I will erase every last one of those cursed creatures." She smiled wickedly and declared that she would build a beautiful world existing solely for herself. Quay and his companions continued flying away. Masa said fearfully, "We have not slowed down at all." Dan trembled and called, "Quay? Hey, Quay." But Quay moved like uncontrollable lightning. She suddenly realized, this is bad. He has lost control again. "You truly are troublesome." Dan drew a deep breath and exhaled. Using every muscle in her mouth, she screamed, "How many times are you going to lose control like this? Protect me properly, understood?" In horse form, Quay's eyes suddenly widened with awareness. He slowed and braked sharply, sending Dan and everyone else tumbling forward. Dan raised her face with deeply worried eyes. As she called him, Quay returned to his original form. Dan approached and asked, "Are you all right?" Quay lowered his head. "I lost control again." Breathing heavily, he said, "I swore I would protect you, yet I ended up like this." Dan watched him with visible emotion. Doc also approached with the wooden cart. Masa smiled and said, "So you two brought that large wagon with you? Drive it straight beyond the territory of the Church of Holam Na. There is a city ahead. At least there, things should be." Hay still looked depressed. "I'm sorry. I will leave you here. Traveling with a disgraced knight is too dangerous. I cannot continue with you." But Dan cheerfully walked over and patted her shoulder. "Oh, stop that." Hay looked surprised. "Huh?" Dan ordered bossily. "Close your mouth and get on the wagon." Quay said, "You truly need to learn how to distinguish enemies from allies." Hay seemed to awaken at those words. "I want that too. I truly do." Looking at everyone gently, she murmured, "Allies." Then Quay turned an ear toward the forest after hearing something. He announced, "Something is coming." Everyone immediately panicked. "The pursuers? Hurry, run." The old wagon rolled rapidly forward. Quay glanced aside, saw something, and cried out in shock, "That is a wolf." A bloodthirsty wolf ran beside the old wagon. Quay stammered as its predatory eyes focused on the group, trying desperately to catch them.